So welcome to episode 4 of Level Up, our weekly Q&A show where your questions drive our conversation. If you're watching on LinkedIn or on YouTube, please do follow the links in the chat to register and we'll send you over to Slido, which is really where you get to join in and drive the show by voting up the questions that you want answered. Without your questions, well, we don't really have too much to talk about, so we'll just end up talking amongst ourselves. So please do head over there. It'll be great to welcome you. The first half of the show this week is general Q&A, and our theme is project and change management in this episode. So you can ask pretty much anything that you would like relating to that. In the second half, well, we're going to choose a topic where we want to spend a little more time, and more on that later. So without further delay, let's go over and meet our panel for today. This particular show is aimed at people in the Asia Pacific region. So it's with great pleasure that we're going to start in Australia and welcome two of our special guests, beginning with Louisa Leung, who is the managing partner at Lifting Lanterns. Louisa, please do tell us a little bit about yourself and your role, please.
Thanks, Nick. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here today. I have a passion for all things projects, and everything that in my life and in my work is all about projects. So that's what Lifting Lantern is, training, consulting, all around projects. So looking forward to the questions today.
Okay, thank you. And a great name for a business as well, Lifting Lanterns. I love that idea. So very welcome. Great to see you. And we're going to move from Western Australia, from Perth, right on the kind of west coast, all of the way across the opposite end of the country and the continent to the Gold Coast, and welcome James Kinch, who's the country manager for the international project management training company, Training ByteSize. So welcome, James. Great to see you.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to the session.
Over to Europe, and in the Netherlands, a change management professional who's working with ASML is Yogyata. Please, Yogyata, you're most welcome to join us today. Great to see you. Please do tell us a little bit about yourself and your role.
Yes, thank you, Nick, and thank you for inviting me. I'm working as a product change leader in a semiconductor company called ASML. I've been in change management for the last 10 years, and yeah.
Okay, all right, well, excellent. Thanks very much. And last but not least is Marc Waterman. He's a project management manager with STANLEY Security. And Marc's actually leading today's focus topic. So Marc, please do tell us a little bit about yourself and your role.
Thank you, Nick. Great to be here, and yeah, it's a very interesting title, project manager. I think it's a skill that many of us have, even if it's not a formal job title. And certainly, part of the projects that I'm included on is making sure that we have global shipment of materials from obviously all over the world to make sure that we can achieve success. And I think if we can focus on achieving that success, that is ultimately the most important part in project and change management.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it was military man Omar Bradley, General Bradley, who once said that he said that amateurs talk about strategy. He said professionals talk about logistics. So interesting quote for that one, but absolutely agree with you. And we'll come back to you, if we may, a little bit later on, because Marc's going to be exploring our focus topic for today, which is all about change in the pandemic, and we're really looking forward to that. So look, you may be watching this and thinking to yourself that, you could answer questions and you'd like to join us on the panel. And we absolutely would love you to do just that. So just volunteer, put yourself forward for a future show. When you register, just tick the little box that says you're interested in becoming a panelist, and we'll be in touch with you. Now, today we've had a couple of things that are going on. We've got some internet connection issues that we're dealing with. And one of those has been a large internet outage actually in Bangalore in India, which may well be affecting Rami's connection. And it definitely affected our question master for today, Suchitra, who unfortunately is watching via her phone rather than being able to join us. So our question master for today is Charlotte Miller, who's joining us from the Thames Valley in the UK. So let's jump straight in, Charlotte, and have our first question, please.
Thank you, Nick. So we have a question from Sankaran Ram. I'm looking to switch my career to project management, but with the current pandemic, is it really the best time to become a project manager?
Okay, so switching careers in a pandemic. Yeah, Mark, go ahead.
Absolutely. I think it's a fantastic time. I'm a firm believer that if you want to make the change, sorry, excuse me, if you want to make a change, the best time is always right now. And, you know, so sometimes it can seem that the world is in a crazy place. I'm not quite sure what's going on. And is this really the best time? Is there going to be a better time? No, the time is always right now. It's an exciting career. It's an important career. And I think if it's a change that you're passionate about, that passion will carry you through regardless of the external situation. So absolutely take the leap now.
Okay, James, I'm going to come to you in a moment. I completely agree, Mark. I think, you know, if you can choose, you know, a role to work in that you enjoy, that comes through, you know, by the bucketful while you're doing it. James, pivoting in the pandemic to becoming a project manager.
I would actually completely agree with you, Mark. I think that, as contrary to how it may sound, I think now is a really good time more than ever. I speak to PMs on a daily basis, you know, in the training industry, and none of them are sat at home. They're all under the pump, busier than ever. You know, these guys are working 11-hour days a lot of the time, and we've actually thrown a few course extensions, you know, here and there for our online training because they just don't have the time at the moment. So I think we're seeing examples, especially in the public sector. People are saying there actually seems to be a shortage of PMs at the moment. So yeah, I think it's needed now more than ever.
I definitely agree with that. You know, the quality of the roles is improving all of the time. The recognition for that role is improving all of the time. And you know, step forward leadership positions. Project management is a leadership position, and you know, if you feel that you can get the best out of a team and work collegiately and bring people with you, it's a fantastic opportunity for people. And it's the kind of thing that in most of our professional lives, you know, that ideal moment rarely arrives. Okay, so it's about recognizing that the planets are kind of reasonably well lined up and giving it a go and seeing what can happen. You know, what's the worst that can happen, right? You know, you learn some new skills, you try some new stuff, and you know, things generally improve from it. So I would say definitely, you know, back your instincts, do your research, of course, go online, find stuff out, talk to people who actually really do the job. Yesterday, I had a friend over who was, she actually works for a large motor manufacturing company as a project manager. That's her primary role. She also does a whole load of other things as well, I have to say. So her job title doesn't have project manager in it, but Mark, to your point, it's absolutely what she does on a day-to-day basis. And with that particular company, it's a European organization, and they have a little quieter period in kind of August, all right? But it's mid-September now, and things are starting to, you know, really ramp up again. And of course, there'll be that feeling soon that says, we need to get everything done by Christmas. So great question. Thank you very much, Sanjeev. That's really brilliant. Charlotte, next question, please.
Question from Eva in the UK. Do I need to have a formal qualifications to become a project or change manager?
Okay, Louisa first and then Yogyata.
I think our formal qualification is always nice to have, and it can be on different journeys of your path. So if you're starting in the beginning of being a project manager, it helps you get you through the door, it helps you with the basics, it helps you with an understanding. If you've been a project manager for a few years, it still helps you to confirm what you know and what you're doing is on the right path. And if you're a veteran project manager, it even helps you refresh the things that you've been doing and just to make sure that you're still in touch with the latest on the qualifications. So it's always nice to have.
Yeah, great advice, great advice. And Yogyata?
Yeah, I totally agree with Louisa. And I think for me personally, when I started as a change manager, I did not have a formal qualification. But as I worked toward and I got an experience, I think I started with having those qualifications that was required to upskill my change management knowledge. I think in the beginning, even the education is free. You can watch YouTube. You have e-learning courses out there, which you can at least grasp the basic knowledge. And as you have an experience, you can have the change management or the project management qualification, which helps you to excel, I guess.
Yeah, I think you're right, Yogyata. It's kind of self-learning. That personal study is a great place, and to your point, there's huge resources available, online for people to be able to make a start. Ramani, great to see you're back again. So I'm pleased that your connection has allowed you, I think, to join us. So I might come to you in a moment.
Okay.
Although, yeah, we can hear you. I know that I know that your video's frozen a little bit just right
the video
now.
is a problem. Some network connectivity in Bangalore, so we are having a low band connection. So
Okay,
the
all right.
video is frozen,
Okay.
but are you able to hear me?
So let's press on while we're waiting for Rami's connection to come back. One thing that I would suggest for people is that once you've done that self-study, it's actually really good to talk to somebody who can help structure your learning a little bit, just so that you don't, kind of waste time and so on. Mark, do you want to jump in, and then we'll talk about the actual kind of types of qualifications that are available to people?
Yeah, I'm gonna throw something contentious here and say no.
Okay.
You don't need to have formal qualifications to become a project or a change manager.
Okay.
You don't. And I see this quite a lot on LinkedIn, actually. I've managed to become a board member without any qualifications. Not everybody has qualifications. They are not essential for you to do these jobs.
Right.
So I think the question is, what is your intent behind achieving a qualification? And there are several different reasons for it. Absolutely agree with Louisa and Yogyata that they can absolutely help you get into a field that may be new to you. Yeah, and think about the type of qualification that you want to achieve from that. But ultimately, it comes down to who you are as a person. I mean, I'm sure we'll get into it later, but for example, the difference between a change manager and a change agent. Yeah, a change agent doesn't have that formal line kind of responsibility to be a change manager, but that they can still demonstrate those skills that they have. I think the qualifications for me is more about understanding what's coming up in the future. Before I gained the qualifications, and then I'm a big advocate of qualifications, is that it could almost feel like I was on the edge of my seat with a project or on the edge of my seat with a change program. Whereas after receiving the qualifications, there was a much more structured future plan. I was able to mitigate the risks better, and I was able to achieve better outcomes. So although I wouldn't say it's essential, I'd say it's absolutely beneficial.
Okay, all right, and that's a really good distinction to be able to draw, because and I'll come back to kind of two situations where I think that qualifications are going to be a real help to people in a moment. James, you wanted to contribute?
Yeah, I think there's a lot more, like Mark was saying, to it than getting the qualification. I think it certainly helps, and unfortunately, how it is with some job applications, if you do a quick search through job listings, some of them are asking for foundation or basic qualifications in a lot of instances. So even though that might not be necessarily the right approach, it's some organizations just mandate it. Unfortunately, that's what we get. That's the feedback we get from PMs that are looking for jobs in the current industry. So yeah, it does help, I suppose, but it shouldn't be essential.
Yeah, you're right. I think there are some things which you can learn. You can learn them through experience, and you can also learn them by sitting some taking some structured learning. And then the qualification itself really plays into two areas. Firstly, from the organization's point of view, it's a way of them being able to demonstrate that they have a certain level of attainment within their organization. So if they're taking on work on behalf of other clients, so maybe it's a professional services business that provides project managers, if you like, plural, to their customers as part of the work that they're doing, it's a way for them to be able to mitigate, risk by saying, everybody that's going to be involved with you, Mr. Client, has a certain level of basic education, basic qualifications, and so on. So there's a risk element to it. The other one that I would argue as well, to sort of plays to James's point, and I think what everybody's been saying, which is that it's a little bit like a passport sometimes. It actually provides you with the chance to be able to capture your aptitude to do something, that you can do it, and provide you with evidence that allows you then to turn that into something that can secure a brand new role. So if you've been working on projects previously as an individual contributor, taking a qualification in project management may give you actually the chance, to James's point, to apply for a role which takes you that step up or sideways or differently that you couldn't achieve just with your experience, just with your CV before. Many employers tend to look at what you've done in the past, and if you've not done project management explicitly in the past, they may look disfavourably on you without actually having that qualification. So a good mix of thoughts there. Excellent. Thank you very much, Charlotte. Next question, please.
A question from Chris. What is the one skill a change manager needs to have or should have?
Okay, what is one skill? Yogyata, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think from my understanding or experience, I think one of the most key skill that a change manager should have or kind of must have is the awareness and the listening skill. Awareness why the change is needed in an organization or in an individual level, to understand the impact of it and to listen to others, their problems. And I think that is one of the key skills for being a change manager.
Yeah, I think that that's really insightful, being able to listen and understand and convert that input of information into actionable activities is very, very important. I think building on that, I would certainly extend it into communication skills and that listening and responding, because sometimes people talk a lot about change managers needing to be very empathetic and kind of being able to have all of those soft skills, and I think that that's true, yes, certainly, but also it's about remaining on course and being able to not necessarily sell the change to people, but explain it. And that often requires us to, rephrase, reconsider, rethink how it is that we're actually putting across the information. Yes, you got to go ahead.
I think the biggest challenge that I have seen in 10 years or 11 years of my experience is the communication that is needed as a change manager. I think that's, and you rightly put it, Nick, that it's the key, I think, to have that skill as a change manager. And I see very often that is forgotten, that the communication, what is going to change, how it is going to change, and all those things are forgotten in an organization, and that has a huge impact. And it causes a lot of problems, at least my experience personally.
Yeah, go ahead, James.
Just to agree with you, Yogyata, really, that, I think during any times of uncertainty, everyone's a bit highly strung. Employees, stakeholders want to know that they're being listened to. So just echoing the kind of active listening point, 2 ears in 1 mouth quote, shouldn't all be talking, should be a lot of listening, because I think that's really important.
Sound advice. I paused there for a moment. just to reflect on that personally. Charlotte, let's move on, please. Next question.
Question from Josh Kerr, Sydney. I'm currently based in Sydney and we're in lockdown. Will I still get the same benefits of virtual learning for my project management qualification as I would do doing this in the classroom?
Interesting question. And I would say a lot depends, but I do want to, share some evidence of why I'm going to say that in a few moments. James, do you want to jump in first, and then we'll pick the brains of other folks on the panel?
Yeah, I would just say that, there's obviously a huge element to virtual training that you miss, in face-to-face interactions with not only the trainer, but with other students as well. But if you can, what we're trying to do is like mitigate these things with little tools that we use, like we're using Slido now, Kahoot, the online quiz platform, breakout rooms, even chat boxes. These little things can make huge differences and huge improvements to the quality of the training and the feedback that we get from delegates. So I would just say that making sure the organization has not only experience in classroom delivery and the trainer, but also virtual as well, because there are some big differences and you want to make sure that they're using these tools, to get the most out of it.
I think that's really, really important, James. We need to adapt the way in which we teach if we're going to help learners learn in different ways. And certainly this medium is very different, to how you might interact, in a face-to-face classroom environment. Mark, go ahead.
Absolutely agree with James. I've been on both sides of the fence for both environments, classroom and online. Personally, I prefer face-to-face in person because there's a much more energy about it for me. Will you have the same benefits? Well, I think that depends on you, Josh, really, and how you learn and what you want to receive from it. But to echo what James was saying, there is I think I've seen a definite rise in people who can deliver training, and I would challenge if it's actual training, actual learning that's occurring, or whether it's a session such as this, which is far more interactive than many that I've seen. But for me, sitting on a Zoom call for an hour without my camera turned on, without being able to see faces, that's not conducive to my learning. So it's absolutely research the company that you're thinking about undertaking the training with and making sure that they are a should we say proper training organization with the skills, with the tools, with the now experience to be able to deliver the best experience for you, Josh.
Yeah, most definitely. Ramani, I'd like to come to you, if I may, and just ask for your thoughts on this. Clearly, your work has a huge span of complexity. Do you find that you're needing to adapt your coaching, teaching, consulting style when you're working virtually, as against working, physically face to face with people? Yes, please, Ramani. Can you go ahead? You may be on mute at the moment. I'm not sure if you're having connection problems again. Okay, let me know in the chat, Ramani, if you can, if you can hear us, and then we'll come back to you in a few moments. Look, one of the things here that I saw in around about 12 months ago or so was the shock and the horror amongst the teaching community, particularly in professional education. It happened, of course, for people who were working in universities, colleges, high schools, and in, first year's education as well. But the shock and the horror that happened in kind of professional teaching and learning was just as acute. And the gap in technology skills and in understanding the medium and being able to adapt the way in which teaching happens online was vast. Now, some early adopters were able to pivot quite quickly, and begin to learn those tools and techniques. Firstly, I think you need to re-engineer your approach. You need interaction. Without interaction, you don't know what's going on. And in the classroom, you can kind of pick up this sort of sixth sense that people are tuning out. Right? When they're looking at you, you can kind of pick it up. And so you need to be able to find those techniques again online. And James mentioned a couple of the different collaboration platforms, you know, interactive whiteboards, amazing, breakout rooms so that you can set tasks and give that, devolve that responsibility and therefore engagement, you know, to smaller groups of people, to force, if you like, in some ways, or at least engineer that higher level of interaction so that people become more active in their learning rather than passively receiving the information. And I think also it's a good idea to build in, you know, a little bit of social time so that just as you would have done in the physical environment, you know, people are still online when they're chatting and just kind of hanging out with each other a little bit, because that allows them to feel comfortable and to settle and, you know, start to build those interpersonal relationships, which are absolutely critical for people to retain the information that's being given and to figure out what's important out of the curriculum content which is being imparted. So look, if you're involved in teaching and learning online, and this is a topic which is interesting you, and you've got ideas about how to improve things and what you've enjoyed and what you've found valuable, then, you know, drop us a note in the chat on YouTube or on LinkedIn, and we'll pick that up and feed it into this session or one in the future. So great question, John. The last thing that I would say on that is statistically, actually, we've been watching this as an examination institute really carefully. And one thing that perhaps might not, you know, surprise everybody, but may do others, is that statistically, we've seen very little difference between the pass rates of those people who have been taught face-to-face and those people who have been taught virtually. Now, I can say this with some confidence because we've now been doing thousands and thousands and thousands of online virtually taught examinations that have followed, you know, classrooms which have been wholly and solely delivered online, whether it was self-paced or whether it was what I would call kind of this sort of live, you know, live web interaction, if you like. So there's very little difference actually. Statistically, it's pretty much the same. There's no advantage to one over the other that we have been able to witness. Charlotte, next question, please.
Question from James in the UK. Who is a change agent? How are change agents different from a change manager?
So that's a good question. So how is it different to be a change agent than a change manager? I would say, from my perspective, one is somebody who is acting as an individual contributor, and, you know, taking up the baton, if you like, in the race. The change manager might have a broader set of responsibilities, but they're not mutually exclusive. Yogyata.
Yeah, I think change agent is an initiator of the change who is also supporting the business as usual. And change manager is someone who is transitioning the organization or an individual as a whole from the current state to a desired state. I think that is, yeah, more or less the difference, I would say. Yeah,
I think you're right. It's to do with scope. I would hope that all change managers also are agents for change, but they may be, you know, acting in a more subtle way and thinking about how they differentiate that catalytic effect for different audiences. Because if your scope is broad and you're working, you know, perhaps on a multi-site, you know, or even a multi-country initiative, then you need to be able to consider the situations of everybody in the community in all of those different locations. So the change management generally will have a broader scope or have a greater degree of responsibility. And the change agent in us all should be the one who is embracing it and helping it along and making sure that things happen. Very good. Nice question. Thank you very much. Next question, Charlotte.
Question from Monique Miles. Oh, so sorry, I've just got rid of that question. I do apologise. A question from Priya in Bangalore. What is meant by individual change management and organisational change management?
Okay, this will be the last question before our focus topic. So individual change management versus organisational change. I'm thinking here again that, you know, this is something to do with kind of scope, if you like, really. Each of us has an opportunity each January, usually, to kind of look at ourselves and think about what new things am I going to do this year, and you know, what changes am I going to make. And I think the pandemic has actually prompted us to lock in some new resolutions, actually, not necessarily linked to the beginning of a calendar year, but linked to a change in lifestyle and what's important, and, you know, friendships and community and connections and so on. Yogyata.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, individual change management is the one who is kind of making those successful changes happen. And organizational change management would be the one who is making sure not only he's also taking care of the individuals along with the organization as a whole to transform from the, again, current state to the desired state. And, you know, as you said, Nick, in the past, to embrace the change and to help and support others to accept that change that is going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's an element of being able to do things for ourselves, which is easy and straightforward and kind of clear, if you like. When you start working on organizational change, then you also have to start, you know, thinking about, you know, future state design or organizational design, you know, new roles, responsibilities, transitioning, you know, people's jobs from the current state into the future state. So there's an awful lot kind of involved in that. So look, very good. So interesting conversation so far. Thank you very much indeed, panel. Great job. Let's change gear now, if we may, and begin to think about our focus topic. For those of you who are in Slido and asking the questions and voting them up, that's brilliant. Please continue to do that, but just click on the little focus topic tab now to enter your questions into this section. Today, our topic is all about change in the pandemic. Each country has adopted its own strategies for coping with the impact. And while some lives, I think, have been only lightly impacted, for others, the impact has been tremendous, with lives and livelihoods lost. As organisations adapt to this changing landscape, what are our experiences and how have they been formed during this time? So I'm going to hand over to Marc, who's going to share his thoughts and experiences on change in the pandemic. Over to you, Marc.
Thank you, Nick. What an incredible topic to talk about. And when given this opportunity, there was a little bit of a, wow, where do I start kind of moment. There's so much to potentially talk about. There's the lockdowns, obviously, that's occurring. There's employment changes that are occurring. There are, particularly in my field, supply chain issues globally around the world, with supply and demand changing between different industries, etc. So when I was thinking about this, I thought, well, we're talking about leveling up in project and change management. I wanted to bring something of value and something that comes across in abundance when we learn about project and change management is that it's about people. So taking a look at the slide here, we can see what's going on for people. This was a study that was done by the CIPD, the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. And so they went out and they were asking, I think, about 5,000 people across various different industries on how they were feeling about the change. So taking a look at some of these stats here, 56% don't feel adequately consulted about the work model. And this talks exactly to some of the discussion that we were having slightly earlier about communication, you know, and if 56%, over half of the workforce don't feel that they've been adequately consulted. And picking up on that communication piece that we heard about earlier, we have to think about how we communicate as well. You know, are we swamped by emails? Are we swamped by Zoom calls? Are we swamped by telephone calls? Whatever it is, different people will need to be consulted and communicated in slightly different ways. 62% of those people are feeling anxious about the future of their work, the future at work, you know, and I think that's a huge number of people to be waking up every day feeling anxious about what's going to happen tomorrow, about their professional career, which brings us lots of stability in our life. 23% believe that they will lose their job in the next 12 months. 23%, almost a quarter of people believe that they will lose their job in the next 12 months. I wonder how many think that they might lose their job in the next 12 months. You know, there's been a huge period of instability. And I think, you know, one of the hardest hitting for me, 28% say that work has had a negative effect to their mental health during this period, which I think is an incredible number. And unfortunately, we don't know how many felt like that before the pandemic. But there's been a definite shift in certainly the people that I've spoken to, the people that I collaborate with, in that there is a shift in how they feel about work. And we often hear that we're now working from home. And I've actually heard another phrase that struck a chord with me, was that we are now living at work. You know, personally, I'm here in a room in my house and I'm here all the time, you know, 7 days a week now. So looking at these stats, I thought, how do I feel about these stats? You know, because it changes when we know what the information is, but what do we do about it? That's the real impact here. What's the effect of this? What's the long-term effect of this? Is this just about the pandemic, or has there been a significant shift in something else that we are experiencing? And I think there has been a bit of a shift that's been occurring for a little time now, to do with the psychological contract that we have with our employment. So if we kind of take a look at the constructs of the psychological contract, thank you. We can see that there's a bit of a shift here. If you're not sure what I'm talking about with the psychological contract, again, the CIPD say that this is the perception of the two parties and their mutual obligations towards each other. Yeah. So the traditional psychological contract that we may have seen quite a few years ago was that people were in employment for quite a long time. Yeah. They tended to start in an entry level position and work their way up the ladder, the corporate ladder. There was a sense of identity that you had from working for that particular organization or working in that particular role. There was certainly a lot more security around it, and there's a lot more structure around it. The new kind of, and these are the kind of things that are not really spoken about, but they're expected from each other. So you may hear things like, if I work hard, if I work extra hours, I'll be given more opportunities to develop and grow. Yeah. The new kind of psychological contract is much more focused around knowledge, flexibility, and change that people are experiencing on a kind of personal level. So what do these psychological contracts have to do with project management or change management? Well, an example from my career very early on, before I got into project management, I came across this project manager, and for some reason, this project manager seemed to just get projects done. There are other project managers who kind of were challenged in this, but this person really managed to achieve success. And so when I was putting this together, I was actually thinking about that relationship and say, well, why did I work harder for that person? Yeah. And it came down to that person really understanding what I wanted from my work. I wanted to learn. I wanted to understand. I wanted to grow and develop as a person and understand from their perspective. That spoke directly to my psychological contract that I hadn't necessarily communicated with that project manager or that organization, but that directly aligned with what I wanted to achieve and how I saw my career progressing. Yeah, because this psychological contract is about me. When this goes well, it's fantastic. I've also had experiences where I was working in a previous organization quite a few years ago, and I was talking to my line manager at performance review time, and I'd met on my KPIs, and he said, "But you failed. You need to improve." I was like, "Well, I don't understand. I thought I'd managed to achieve what was set out for me." And he said, "Yeah, but you didn't give me a report every month to tell me how you were progressing." I said, "Well, that wasn't asked." And he said, "Well, it was implicitly expected." And that drove me nuts. An implicit expectation that I was going to be doing something or delivering something that hadn't even been spoken about. So during this pandemic, I think it's important to bring it back and understand where the people are with their psychological contract and how emotionally they are turning up to work every day. I was again in a previous organization, and I can remember a new CEO coming in, and he said, "I can't guarantee you employment, but I can increase your employability." And that worried me a little bit because I was still in the traditional mindset of that psychological contract. I was here for life, if that makes sense. But actually, that enabled a shift within me to the new psychological contract, where actually change could be a really good, exciting, and beneficial thing for my contract. So thinking back to the stats that we just saw from the CIPD, if 23% believe that they will lose their job in the next 12 months, well, if they're in the new psychological contract state, then that could actually be a good thing. What opportunities does that open up to actually lean into their psychological contract and help them? So moving this forward, I wanted to kind of create a call to action. So what are we going to do about it? What can we do about it? And you'll see the first point there is to talk about it. In my example earlier, my line manager hadn't communicated what his implicit expectations were for me, and that frustrated the heck out of me. That broke down my psychological contract with that employer, and ultimately I moved on. Acknowledging what is actually being said, acknowledging the impact of what is happening, and being able to perhaps roll that up. Is that for me as a person? Is that as part of the team that I'm working on? Is that part of the environment that we are living in right now? Or is there something else that is going on for that? Interpretation is also really important. This is about perceptions. So one person's nice environment might be somebody else's terrible environment. And what do they mean when they're talking about the environment? Are they talking about the plants? Are they talking about how other employees treat them? Are they talking about the working conditions? Are they talking about working from home or working from the office? Or what is it that they like? How important is it to that person? For me, learning development is very important, and it's something that I value in my career, in my employment. And I think this pandemic gives us lots of opportunities to do that. The business, as we saw back in the early 2020s, was in a state of, we've never seen this before. We're not quite sure what's going to happen. So there's lots to learn from that. You can go out, you can explore, and I think some of the positive changes that we have seen from this pandemic is greater flexibility in our work staff. I certainly heard from previous people and the organization that my wife works for that working from home just wasn't an option. Whereas now most of us are working from home. So I think that has increased our trust in our organization and our trust in our people. I think we need to learn from this and learn from having those conversations about what is important to your people. And a kind of example of this, I was looking at a study done by the police force in England and Wales, where actually I think a lot of people, I mean, my father was a police officer, and he was definitely in that traditional mindset of it was a career for life. Whereas if we look at the statistics now across England and Wales, that actually for those aged under 30, the average career span is about 5-6 years within the police force. Now, bearing in mind that their training, their induction is about 2 years, 2.5 years, it's quite a short career within the police force, and then it kind of dips off, and then interestingly, it really spikes up again when people get to about 48 years old, and they choose a different career path. So lots of things are happening, and to kind of close this off is to really support what's happening and support the people, as we heard earlier, listening to them, making sure that they have felt that they have been heard. You know, a lot of people will be feeling that during this pandemic that working from home was kind of forced upon them. These changes have been forced upon them. Well, what do they really need from that psychological contract? What do they need from the psychological contract from the organization? What do they need from the project that they're working on? What do they need from the change that is being happening right now? You know, and making sure that if you can align with that, whether from an organization, a project, or a change perspective, you will achieve much better buy-in, and you'll achieve much better traction and much more likely success.
Some really wise words there, and some great insights. Thank you very much, Mark. One of the things that you know, I'm kind of taking from that as well is that, you know, it's very much situational, and it shows us what one country was thinking. The CIPD are a great organisation. They have really strong reach in the UK. Through all kinds of employers, from the very small to the very, very large, the enterprise level, and both in public sector and also in commercial organisations. So really got great coverage. So I think, you know, their findings from last year are also reflective of the point at which the understanding was around the pandemic at that stage in this country, and people's outlook at that time, which was, I think, of the moment. As we kind of fast forward to, you know, 1 year later, seeing what is actually happening in the economy versus what everybody thought might happen, is quite interesting to kind of see those two inflection points. Certainly in APMG, you know, we're a global organization, and we've been affected in different levels at different times in different countries. So it began with our colleagues in China. We're in Northeast China, so they were to some extent protected by geography from everything that was happening. But nonetheless, you know, there were really, you know, quite intrusive changes that needed to be made. You couldn't go to work, you know, everybody had to work from home. This is all a familiar story to everybody around the world. But that happened there really kind of around about February time, 2020. And then we've seen that roll across the planet as the pandemic has kind of taken effect in different countries. So really interesting and really insightful. Thank you, Mark. Some great thoughts there. So Ramani, I'm going to try one more time and come to you for this next question. So Charlotte, can you read the question for us, and then we'll see if we can hear Ramani's audio.
Question from Suresh, Mumbai, India. What are the top key things which have changed concerning the way that we work during the pandemic?
Okay, Ramani, can you hear us? Okay, unfortunately not. So we'll go to Louisa and then James. Thanks.
I actually see this on my husband. He's working from home and he's just got 7 hours of back-to-back meetings. I think the expectation of meetings as well, that you're actually going to be on time. So if it starts at 2 o'clock, you're going to be there 2 o'clock on the dot. Whereas when you're in the office, you might actually take 5 minutes to walk between buildings, between meeting rooms. It was kind of okay to be a few minutes late. But now the expectation is if you're not joined in already on the dots, people will be calling you and asking, where are you? And even if you wanted to have a conversation with someone, just one-on-one, I've noticed that people will say, can you please book it into my calendar? So the way that we work now is that we'd rather have a meeting, even if it's a quick half-hour conversation, please place it in my calendar so that we can have a chat, rather than let's just go over to someone's desk and have a quick conversation.
I think you're absolutely right. I've suffered from that a lot, you know, and, you know, people saying you're 30 seconds late, 60 seconds late, you know, this kind of thing, which is, wouldn't happen in the physical world, it wouldn't happen because they would see you down the corridor. I think part of it is just that they have no idea, whether you're going to be there or whether you're going to be an hour late, I suppose. But one of the things that kind of comes out from that for me is, why are we still booking meetings that last an hour? Why are we all doing that? This came about because the early ways that you booked a meeting room was somebody in the office printed out a piece of paper and they hung it on the wall outside the meeting room. You walked along and you wrote your name on it. And those slots happened to be an hour long. So it's now embedded in people to book a meeting that starts on the hour and finishes on the hour. So 2 thoughts. Firstly, make your meetings last 50 minutes. See what happens. Secondly, start your next meeting 10 minutes early if you want to, and just let people hang out. Come early, have a chat, say hello, how are you doing, what's happening? Do it like that, see what happens. James, go ahead.
Yeah, I think for us, we've really refined our virtual course delivery, and we touched upon this before, but not only have we done this internally with our trainers, and they can, they're fantastic at the way they present virtually, but all of our clients are now a lot of the clients are used to dialing in remotely. So it's whereas initially it used to be almost they had no choice, they had to do virtual training or they'd postpone the training course. Now with things opening up in the UK and training getting back to normal again somewhat, we're seeing people are still wanting to choose the virtual option in many cases, just because, like you mentioned before, Nick, the pass rate's still up there. There are many more advantages as well, with flexibility, things like that. So it's good that a few more clients are trusting virtual training than before.
Yeah, definitely. I think that has been, for us, it's been a huge shift. All right, as an examination institute, we were probably doing about 2/3 of our business pre-pandemic on paper around the world. We printed exam papers, we sent them around the world to people. They sat down with a pencil, and they put in all of their answers, and then we then processed all of that paper. Since the pandemic, mid 90% is online. 95, 97, 93, those sorts of numbers online, and it's not changing. And the countries that are, back open again with face-to-face training happening, it's not changing. The percentage is remaining like that. And I think the principal reason is that actually, when it comes to exam conditions, when it comes to, wanting to focus, then there are many advantages to being actually in a space where you're comfortable, where you can, set yourself up and focus and, then sit your examination. So interesting changes of behavior. Good question. Next question, please, Charlotte. We'll need to pick the pace up, I think, now, if we're going to get through a couple more.
Question from Nick in Wokingham, UK. Has the panel seen any benefits in having to work remotely, and can these be locked in long term?
I'm not going to answer this question because it's my question. So I was interested in the panel's thoughts on that. Anybody like to volunteer? Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I think there's been some great benefits, and some of the challenges that we've spoken about, I've certainly seen them recognised within an organisation. So I think that maybe interestingly, and there should be some study done on this, but empathy is increased. I think we can all relate to each other, having to be in those lockdowns, having to work from home, having to be on Zoom for hours and hours at a time. And I think it's really increased the empathy, which hopefully will continue. I've certainly seen more people being treated as people as a result, and making those times, as Nick suggested there, 5-10 minutes at the beginning of a call to say, how are you doing? How are you really doing? Which I think has been a big positive from this.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, and appreciate that. Next question, Charlotte. To be the last one, I think we might fit one more in, depending. Let's go for the next one.
Question from Nikki in the UK. Can change management techniques used in an organisational context be used in a personal context to cope with the changes brought on by the pandemic?
Okay, so can you apply your learning from people like the Change Management Institute, from the various methods and so on, into our personal lives to make a difference? Real quick, Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. What springs to mind is the Kubler-Ross curve, which as it's probably spoken about in every change management course, and that was actually taken from personal change and then applied to the organizational context of having that similarity. So, you know, absolutely take a look at the Kubler-Ross curve, and a lot of the change principles is about winning over the hearts and minds, which is again about us as people rather than a formal waterfall or an agile project plan.
Absolutely agree with that. So thank you very much. So, and a great note on which to end the focus topic Q&A. So thank you very much indeed, panel. Just before we kind of finish today, I would like to, invite the panel to kind of share their final thoughts. I know we've had some technology issues in the background, which have been running today, and some very nimble work by different people to try and overcome those. James, let's come to you first, if I may. And then I'll come to Yogyata next.
Yeah, just to stay on the theme, I suppose, changing the pandemic and what I see for the training industry, it's been quite inspiring to see and hear people's stories, individuals coming forward and using the change in the pandemic as a positive, using it for upskilling, using it for retraining, and kind of, hearing there's so much bad news in the world. It's nice to hear some good stuff for a change.
Definitely.
And that'd be my final thought. I think that's good. Nice to have some positivity.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Yogyata.
I totally agree with James. I think that for past 1 year, the world has been trying to cope up with this pandemic, and to have this event or session like this to bring some positivity over the lives of the people, and to, in a way that is beneficial, and to have the knowledge spread across the globe. I think it's really nice. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Charlotte, I'll come to you in a moment. Mark?
I think echoing, it's good to have some positives, but I think this has been a great opportunity for many of us to press that reset button and to ask the question, who am I? Where do I want to work? How do I kind of want to work? What do I want to achieve out of my work career? And I think they are, personally, always great questions to ask, because they tend to bring exciting journeys and answers.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Charlotte?
Thanks, Nick. So before the pandemic, I was traveling quite a lot, and I got to meet some wonderful people face to face. But now I sit and I talk virtually to so many more virtual people and meet more amazing people than I ever have done. My colleague Suchitra, who fortunately can't be with us today, you just meet so many different people, and it's just an amazing experience from such a negative experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does make sense. Thank you very much. And Louisa, your thoughts, please, before we finish.
Projects bring on change, and I think we've got lots of projects in our life and in work as well. So I think it's important for us to realize that change is going on more than ever now and faster than ever. So we need to actually take a step back sometimes and prioritize those changes and see which change that we think we need to do now versus something that we can actually go, actually, we can do that another time, so that we don't get too much change fatigue.
Okay, good point. It's about having that stamina and the pace, and not trying to run a marathon as a series of sprints. So brilliant. Thank you very much indeed for all of those thoughts, panel. So great job, everybody. Look, let's look forward now and think about what's coming up next. So a little bit later on today, if you're up for that, then please do join us. We have a session all about organisational agility, which is coming up at 1 p.m. British Summer Time, 2 in Europe, and 8 a.m. if you're in the US. Next week, join us again at this time, 7 a.m. British Summer Time, 11:30 in India, and 4 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, as we discuss cyber resilience. that's with a particular focus on bringing your own device to work, which quite frankly would have been something which was an option in the past, but a lot of IT people have been hugely grateful for people actually having their own kits so that they can work from home, whether it's your home network or your home devices. Joining in and getting that work done. So join us for that cyber resilience next week at the same time. Later on the same day at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, British Summer Time, we'll be discussing public-private partnerships. Now, this is one of the first of a series of discussions and debates around PPPs, which operate around the world. And the particular focus topic in that one is all about developing winning teams. Subscribe to the show using the little QR code on the screen, and we'll send you a personal summary of what's coming up and how you can join us here on the panel in the future and level up your career with APMG. So thanks very much, everybody. We'll see you next time. Thanks.